My family charged me $1,800 for a basement for 3 years. But when they kicked me out to give my space to my unemployed brother and demanded I keep paying, I disappeared to another state and they never saw coming what I did. I'm 29 years old. I work in logistics for an energy company, and basically half the month I'm out of town on projects, and the other half I'm in Edmonton where my family was. I say was because I don't live there anymore. I don't talk to them anymore. And honestly, I feel like I should have done it years ago. But let me tell you the whole story, because what happened in the last few months was so absurd that sometimes even I can't believe it, and I need to get it off my chest because every time I think about it, my blood boils. I guess I should start by explaining what things were like before everything exploded. My parents, Virginia and Anthony, have always been the kind of people who, I don't know how to say it, like they have their favorites pretty clear. My brother Benjamin, who's 32, was always the golden child, the one who could do whatever he wanted and they justified everything. I, on the other hand, was always the responsible one, the one who got good grades, the one who got a good job, the one who never gave them problems. And, looking back, I think that's exactly why they saw me as some kind of walking ATM. You know what I mean? When I got my job about 5 years ago, I was super excited because the salary was good, like really good for someone my age. The problem was that I spent 2 weeks working out of town, in remote sites, and then 2 weeks in Edmonton. At first I was living with a friend, but she moved in with her boyfriend, and my parents told me, "Hey, why don't you stay with us? We have the finished basement. It's like a small apartment. We'll charge you something modest, and that way when you're away, you're not paying for an empty place." And honestly, it sounded reasonable. The basement was nice. It had its own bathroom, a small kitchenette, separate entrance, perfect for someone who was only there half the time. We agreed I would pay $1,500 a month. It wasn't cheap, but not terrible either, considering it included utilities and internet and stuff. That was 3 years ago. But here's the detail I should have seen as a giant red flag. After like 6 months, my mom started saying that prices for everything had gone up, that they needed more help with the bills, that if I could contribute a little more. And I, being the idiot I was, said yes. We went up to $1,700. Then, a year ago, another similar conversation, and I ended up paying $1,800 a month for a basement in my parents' house. $1,800. Let me repeat that because it sounds ridiculous even when I say it. $1,800 monthly. And not just that, I also ended up buying food for the house when I was there. Like, I'd do the big Costco runs and stuff, and I'd help with other random things that came up. My mom would tell me, "Oh, Christina, could you help us with the gas bill this month?" Or, "We need to fix the roof. Can you contribute?" And I always said yes because, well, they were my parents, right? You're supposed to help your family. Meanwhile, Benjamin was living in his own house with his wife and 2 kids, a boy who was 8 and a girl who was 6, I think, or maybe 7, I'm not sure. He worked in car sales, but honestly, he never did very well. Like, he was always complaining that he wasn't selling enough, that his boss was an asshole, that customers were all cheapskates. My mom always defended him, said it was a tough market, that he had a lot of responsibilities with the kids. And I thought, well, we all have responsibilities, but I never said anything because I didn't want to cause drama. So anyway, in February of this year, more or less, my mom called me when I was away working. She sounded super stressed, like almost crying, and told me she needed to talk to me about something important. I obviously panicked, thinking someone was sick or something terrible had happened. She told me that Benjamin had lost his job, that he'd been fired or quit or something like that. The story changed every time they told it, and that he and his family needed to move back home because they couldn't pay their mortgage. And I said, "Okay, I understand it's a difficult situation, but what does it have to do with me?" That's when she dropped the bomb. They needed me to leave the basement because Benjamin and his family needed it. That they were 4 people, and I was only 1. That I was gone half the time anyway. That it would be easier for me to find another place. That I could stay in the little hobby room upstairs, which was basically the size of a glorified closet. No private bathroom. Nothing. I was literally speechless. I was paying them almost $2,000 a month. I'd lived there 3 years without a problem, and now they were basically evicting me. I tried to explain that I needed my space, that little room was ridiculous, that I also needed privacy and a decent place to live when I was in town, but she just kept repeating that family helps each other, that Benjamin needed me, that I was being selfish for not even considering his situation. When I got back to Edmonton that week, we had a family meeting. Benjamin was there with his kicked puppy face, like all sad and needy, and my parents acting like I was a monster for not wanting to give up my space immediately. My dad told me, "Christina, your brother is going through a very difficult time. He needs his family's support." And I told them, "Okay, I understand it's difficult, but I also live here. I pay rent. I have my things organized with my work. You can't just evict me with 2 weeks' notice." But basically, it was already decided. They gave me a month to get my stuff out of the basement. A month. 3 years paying religiously, never late even one day. And they gave me 30 days to get out. The thing is, I was so angry and so hurt that I decided I wasn't going to move to that pathetic little room. I told them I was going to look for another place. My mom got dramatic. Like, saying, "How could I abandon the family at a time like this? What would the neighbors think? That I'd always been so independent and cold." Cold. She called me cold for not wanting to live in a closet. I looked for apartments, but honestly, it didn't make much sense to pay full rent for a place where I was only going to be 2 weeks a month. So I came up with another solution. When I was in town, I'd stay in hotels or resorts with discounts. I had accumulated points from my work, plus I found some good deals for extended stays. It ended up being cheaper than renting a full apartment. And honestly, after the family drama, the idea of being in a hotel where nobody bothered me sounded like paradise. I moved out at the end of March. I got all my stuff out of the basement, put them in a storage unit, and started my new hotel routine. Benjamin and his family moved in like 2 days after I left. They didn't even give me time to clean properly or anything, like they were super rushed to get in. And I thought, well, that's it. Now I can have peace and forget about all this drama. But oh, wait, because this is where things get truly insane. Like 2 weeks after moving out, I get a message from my mom. A long message, like an essay, explaining that she understood I was in a difficult situation, but they were too, and that they expected me to continue contributing to the household expenses. I responded, super confused, saying that I didn't live there anymore, that obviously I wasn't going to pay rent for a place where I wasn't staying, and she responded that it didn't matter, that family helps each other, that Benjamin had no income and they needed my financial support now more than ever. I told them I could help with some things, like send money for food occasionally, but that I wasn't going to pay $1,800 monthly for nothing. I sent $500 for them to buy groceries, thinking it would be enough as a gesture of goodwill. Wrong. Huge mistake. My dad called me screaming. Literally screaming on the phone. That $500 was an insult. How dare I be so stingy when they had raised me and given me everything, that Benjamin had 2 children to feed. I tried to stay calm and explain that I also had my own expenses, that I was paying for hotels, storage, my car, my things, but he didn't want to listen. He just kept yelling about family obligations and respect and loyalty. I hung up the phone feeling like shit. I started crying in the hotel room, like questioning whether I really was as bad a person as they were making me feel. But then I remembered everything I'd paid for years, how I'd always been the one who helped, who contributed, who never asked for anything in return. And I thought, no, I'm not the bad guy here. A week later, I got another call from my mom. But this time she was all sweet and calm, saying she wanted to organize a family video call so we could all talk civilly about the situation, that she'd invited my Aunt Brenda, a couple of cousins, my uncles, like a family intervention. And I, being naive, thought maybe they really wanted to resolve things in a mature way. The video call was a total ambush. Everyone basically took turns telling me I was being selfish, that family comes first, that Benjamin was going through a terrible time and I had the ability to help him but was choosing not to. My Aunt Brenda, who's always thought of herself as like the family's moral conscience, gave me this long speech about how older sisters have a responsibility to take care of their younger brothers, even though I'm the younger one. But okay. And that God puts us in positions of abundance so we can help others. Like, she was lecturing me about religion and morals, and I was just thinking, where are you all when Benjamin needs to be pressured to get a job? But the cherry on top was when my dad said, with all the seriousness in the world, that since I was single without kids, and Benjamin had a top family to support, the fair thing was for me to cover his mortgage until he found work and also help with the kids' school expenses. He said it like it was the most logical and reasonable thing in the universe. I told them they were completely crazy if they thought I was going to pay someone else's mortgage, and I ended up leaving the video call. After that, the harassment intensified. My Aunt Brenda sent me like 3 long emails, like each one several pages, explaining in detail why it was my moral and familial duty to contribute financially, quoting the Bible, and I don't know what other stuff. One of the emails included a complete breakdown of Benjamin's expenses: his mortgage, utilities, food for 4 people, the kids' extracurricular activities, school supplies, clothes. It added up to like $4,500 monthly, and she suggested I cover at least half. Half? $2,250 a month for my adult brother's expenses? Seriously? I didn't even respond to that email, because honestly, I didn't know where to start. Then Benjamin himself started sending me messages. Not directly asking for money. No, that would have been too obvious. Instead, he'd send me Amazon links or store links, like sports shoes for his son, a tablet for his daughter, a new laptop for him because he needed to look for work online. Each message came with some subtle guilt trip like, it would be nice if the kids had new shoes for soccer, or, if I had a decent laptop I could apply to more jobs. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost funny, but it also made me sick. I ignored them all. I wasn't going to fall for that game, but then my parents upped the level. They sent me an email, like super formal, saying they'd calculated that I owed them $2,000 monthly for family support. They weren't even calling it rent anymore. And also I owed them $1,200 in back payments from the previous 2 months. They attached a kind of invoice made in Excel, with all the amounts detailed. It was so ridiculous that I screenshot the email and sent it to my best friend Jessica, asking her if I was losing my mind, or if this was as insane as it seemed to me. Jessica told me to block my entire family and consider talking to a lawyer. But I still had that little voice in my head saying maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should help more. So instead of blocking them, I just stopped responding. I thought eventually they'd get tired and leave me alone. But no. Oh no. My dad Anthony started calling all my relatives, telling them his version of the story, where basically I was a heartless daughter who had abandoned her family in their time of need. Cousins I hadn't seen in years suddenly were messaging me saying they'd heard about the situation and hoped I'd reconsider my stance. Benjamin posted on Facebook, something vague about siblings who turn their backs on you when you need them most, and a bunch of people who didn't know the full context liked it, and commented supportive things. I felt like I was living in an alternate reality. Then, and this was like in June already, my parents started showing up unannounced at my work. Yes, at my work. The first time they came to the Edmonton office where I reported when I was in town, and asked the receptionist to find me because it was a family emergency. I went down thinking someone had died or something serious had happened, and it turns out they just wanted to give me a folder with bills and tell me face to face that I needed to pay. It was so humiliating. My coworkers obviously noticed something weird was going on. I told my mom to never, ever show up at my work again. That if she wanted to talk to me, she could call or text me, but showing up at my office was completely inappropriate. She started crying right there in the lobby, saying I was treating her like she was a stranger, that she just wanted her family to be united. People were staring at us. I wanted to die of embarrassment, but as if that wasn't enough, my mom also called my work once, leaving a message with the receptionist about how she was worried about my mental health and that if they noticed anything strange in my behavior. Fortunately, the receptionist was a super professional woman who just passed me the message without making drama, but still, what the hell? Who does that? They also contacted some of my friends on social media. Jessica forwarded me a message that my mom had sent her, saying she was worried because I'd cut contact with the family and asking if Jessica had noticed changes in me, if I was depressed or using drugs or something. Basically insinuating that I was having some kind of mental crisis, instead of just establishing healthy boundaries. Benjamin also got in the game. He'd send me long messages, super aggressive, saying that because of me his kids were suffering, that they couldn't pay for their activities, that he couldn't look for work properly because he was too stressed about the financial situation. He blamed me for everything, like as if I was responsible for him having lost his job, which to this day, I don't know if he was really fired or if he quit because he didn't like it. The story always changed. In July, things got to a point where I was having anxiety attacks. Every time my phone rang, I felt panic. I couldn't sleep well. I was constantly worried they'd show up somewhere. One day, my parents literally showed up at my hotel. I don't know how they figured out which one I was at. Probably called several until they got the right one. They came to the lobby and asked them to call me. When I went down, my dad had a folder with more papers, more bills, more demands. This time, they didn't just want monthly money, but they also wanted me to buy Benjamin a used car because his was breaking down and he needed transportation to look for work. I told them no, absolutely no, that this had to stop, that I wasn't their personal bank, and that Benjamin was an adult who needed to solve his own problems. My dad turned red with rage, started yelling in the hotel lobby, saying I was a horrible daughter, that I'd become a cold and heartless person since I got that job, that money had changed me. The hotel staff had to ask them to leave. I went up to my room and cried for hours. That night, I made a decision. I started looking for work opportunities in other places. My company had operations in several states, and there was a position available in Texas that involved less travel but better salary. I applied without telling anyone, not even Jessica at first. 2 weeks later, they called me for a video interview. A week after that, they offered me the position. I accepted immediately. The job started in September. They gave me a month to move. I told my company in Edmonton I was leaving, turned in my resignation as professionally as possible, and started organizing my move. I didn't tell my family anything. Absolutely nothing. I knew that if I told them, they'd find some way to sabotage the move or make me feel so guilty that I might reconsider. Jessica helped me organize everything. I hired a moving company, got my stuff out of storage, packed them up, and sent them to Texas. I canceled my cell phone and got a new number. I closed all my social media accounts or made them private and deleted all my family. I basically disappeared. Of my last day in Edmonton, I spent doing final paperwork. I sent my parents an email, short and direct, telling them I was moving out of state for work, that I wouldn't give them my new address, and to please respect my decision to distance myself from the family. I didn't give long explanations, didn't go into details, didn't give opportunity for debate. Send and block. I got in my car with the few things I was taking with me and drove to Texas. It was like 2 days of travel, stopping at motels along the way, and honestly, it was cathartic. With every mile I put between Edmonton and me, I felt like a weight was being lifted off my chest. I arrived at my new apartment in Texas at the end of August. It was a nice building, a spacious studio in a quiet neighborhood. I started my new job in September, and honestly, it was like starting a completely new life. Nobody there knew anything about my family drama. I was just Christina, the new logistics coordinator, a normal girl with a normal life. The first few months were weird, strange. There were moments when I felt incredibly guilty, thinking about my niece and nephew, wondering if they were okay, if they missed me. But then I'd remind myself that Benjamin and his wife were the adults responsible for those kids, not me. That it wasn't my job to make sure they had what they needed. That was their parents' responsibility. There were also moments of pure freedom and relief. Like, the first time I realized I could go to the grocery store without having to think about buying extra stuff for my parents' pantry, or when my paycheck came and all my money was mine to spend on whatever I wanted, without pressures or guilt trips or ridiculous demands. They tried to contact me through different people. I got emails from cousins, from uncles, all with the same spiel about family and obligations. I blocked them all. Once my mom somehow got my new work number and called. But I told my supervisor the situation and he took care of blocking the number. My company was super understanding. Honestly. Jessica kept me up to date on some rumors she heard. Apparently my parents are telling everyone that I had a nervous breakdown and that's why I cut contact, that they're very worried about me. Benjamin keeps posting things on social media about how life is hard when people abandon you, seeking sympathy and attention. But honestly, I don't care anymore. Let them think what they want. Now, almost 6 months after the move, I feel good. Not perfect. Not like everything is rosy, but good. I have new friends here, a job I like, time and money for, myself. I'm going to therapy, processing everything that happened, learning to set healthy boundaries and recognize manipulation when I see it. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, if I was too drastic, cutting all contact. But then I remember all the times I tried to establish reasonable boundaries and they were ignored. All the times I said no, and they made me feel like a monster. All the times I paid, and it was never enough. And I know that taking distance was the only thing I could do to save my sanity and my financial stability. Last week, out of curiosity, I looked up Benjamin's Facebook profile from a fake account. He'd posted something about how he finally got a new job, how he's grateful for the opportunities and the family that supported him in difficult times. The comments were all people congratulating him. Not one mention of all the drama he caused, of all the people he pressured for money, just him presenting himself as a survivor who overcame adversity. And you know what? I'm glad he got a job. Seriously. I hope it goes well for him, and he can support his family without depending on anyone else. But I'm not going back. I'm not going to reopen that door. I learned the hard way that there are people in your life, even family, who will see it as their right to take everything they can from you, and it will never be enough. And that it's okay to say enough. It's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to choose yourself. I guess that's it. There's no happy ending like a movie, where everyone reconciles and hugs. Just a 9-year-old woman who had to move to another state to escape the toxicity of her own family and who's learning to be at peace with that decision. And honestly, I think that's enough.